Uh, so we talk about Deep. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let us see how can we do that. Yeah. So today a quick introduction from myself is are able to see me. I'm not able to see it. Yeah. Okay. So I will be talking about supply chain assessment. Okay, and a 10-step approach. So how you can evaluate your supply chains, assess your supply chains, and how can you improve your supply chain. So that is the topic of today. Quick introduction is myself, Sheikh Abdul Khadar, the CEO of Data Labs India. So I spent majority of my time in Middle East, especially working in strategy and supply chain ERP domains. We are in Data Labs India. What we do is we help organizations to achieve a supply chain and all. So supply chain excellence, we help them, we help our clients to by doing an assessments, implementing solutions, which includes warehousing, manufacturing, execution, transportation, and fleet management, ERP. So the FRUCI is the stack. We are the one who are sponsoring today's event. Okay. So let me share my screen, and if you are able to hear me, just somebody raise the hand or show a message. Okay. So let me share my screen. I think I need to put my PowerPoint into a slideshow first of all, and then I'll share my screen. Yeah. So is it a PowerPoint slide? Slideshow is there, Deep?
Yeah, it has come up. You can proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Deep. Thank you very much. So let us take up a deep dive into your supply chain assessment now. So it's one of the very important session. If you have not seen the details of this blog, so you can see it later. The file is there in the LinkedIn post. Okay. So let us start. So we rightly hear supply chain is the end-to-end supply chain means from suppliers to customer. So this is we keep talking about it. But do we really assess our supply chains properly? Okay. So that is the question. Okay. So let me take you. So this is my quick introduction. So as I said, so I'm also the solution architect for FRUCI and Fru Strategy, the products for achieving excellence in supply chain and strategy. Yeah. So let us talk about the fundamental thing. So if your supply chain needs to achieve excellence, what are the three things you need to do? The first thing is strategic alignment. Okay. So your supply chain has to be aligned to your business strategy. That is very, very important. Otherwise, you don't know really what you're doing, your supply chain is doing. So that must be aligned to the business. That is number one. Number two is your supply chain have to be designed to meet your strategy. Okay. So your supply chain design means everything in supply chain, whether it could be in any inventory policies, it could be supply chain infrastructure, supply chain organization structure, supply chain people, skills, and also your capacities. Okay, so it could be warehousing, it could be manufacturing or logistics, and where they are located, what are the capacities, how much they need to be available, what are the service levels. All these comes into a design process. The third thing is execute perfectly. Okay, so perfect execution is one of the most important part. Okay, now as supply chain managers or supply chain executives or heads of supply chain, where do we focus more? We focus more on perfect execution. So almost always we rush towards execution by follow-ups and doing all the things whatever required for the perfect execution. But if your supply chain is not aligned to the strategy and your supply chain design is not perfect or correct, then what happens? No matter what you do in perfect execution is not going to help you. Okay, so this is one of the most important part. And then second important part is the supply chain strategic alignment and supply chain design. It does not happen day in an everyday basis. So it happens once in a while when you have changes in the business. Okay, so this is very important that you keep on revisiting your strategic alignment and also supply chain design once in a while. As that, is it my supply chain is really aligned to the strategy, or is it the design really aligned to the supply chain, the strategy, and design is done properly? Okay, so this has to be done. Okay, so the moment you do all these three things, there is no one can stop achieving supply chain excellence. Okay, so now how to do that? So how do you do assessment for this? Okay, so this is the subject of today's discussion. Okay, now there is a 10-step approach. Okay, so how do you do this 10-step approach is the story of the presentation today. Okay, so the aligning supply chain to the strategy is something which we never we usually don't hear. So that's the reason I will be speaking more about this. And then your plotting of your supply chain for material flow and the information flows, organizational planning processes, especially for the supply chain. Okay, so identifying the disconnects in planning and also in material flows. Also identifying gaps in the manufacturing process. Manufacturing itself a separate subset of the whole supply chain where everything happens on its own. Okay, so you have the larger manufacturing unit or an assembly unit where you have a material flows and all material flows and also information flows in the shop floor that has to be optimized to align again with the strategy. So that is something which we will discuss. Financial and cost assessment is, see, you do all the things and then you have to make sure that the supply chain design is aligned to the financial flows also. Okay, and your costing is very important. The overall supply chain costing is very critical. So whatever you lose in supply chain, what percentage, it's a direct impact into your total loss. Okay, so organization structure as a step 8 and skills needs to be aligned to the strategy, and you have to make sure that your organization structure and skills are meeting your requirement for the supply chain. Finally, you come up with a plan or you come up with a solution to restructure or realign your supply chain to the strategy and then do the perfect execution. So this is the topic of today. Okay, so let me take it up. Okay, so the step number 1, let us discuss on aligning the business supply chain with the business strategy. Okay, now what do you mean aligning of the business strategy means? So when you define your business strategy, so you come up with the strategic objectives. Okay, so just to tell you very briefly, so when you are doing a strategy, a business strategy, so you identify a strategic objectives. Strategy formulation part is completely different thing. So at the end of when you complete your strategic formulation, so you end up with some sort of like a balance scorecard or a strategy map, or you can call it as an OKR structure or whatever. So you come up with organizational strategic objectives or strategic goals, whatever you call. Now these goals define you what is it you have to do. Okay, so for example, I'll say so delivering on time. I'll just give you another example. So if you are giving the products from make to order, or it's a make to stock environments. So now this must be directly designed included in the design of the supply chain. So identify the strategic objectives, make sure that you have a right KPIs which are relevant to the strategy as supply chain, and then prioritize the initiatives in the supply chain. So now this is how you get aligned to the supply chain as to the strategy. So I know this is a little confusing. Let me give you another slide. So if you see here, So the right side map shows, if I can put my cursor with the color. Okay, so let me see it. Okay, so if you see the strategy map, okay, so you have a 4 perspectives here: financial, customer, process, and learning and growth. So where does that supply chain strategy fits into this? So you have a financial outcomes, customer perspective, where what you are going to give to customer and what customer is going to perceive. So if customer is perceiving availability, then your supply chain needs to be designed for that. If your supply chain is a price conscious, your customer is a price conscious, so your supply chain has to be designed for that. Likewise, okay, your all supply chain strategy will be designed towards that. So in the process perspective, which is internal, so you have 4 themes here as an example. So operations and supply chain, uh, uh, operations and supply chain. Okay, so you have a theme for the supply chain. Okay, now this actually drive you to design your supply chain. Okay, now let us take it up. So when you go to the next level, okay, so how does that you do it? Once you have a strategic objective of achieving something in supply chain, then you need to achieve, you need to identify measures. So as one of our guest speaker, Mr. Girivasan said, so if you don't measure it, you cannot manage it. Yeah, that's perfect. So you identify the metrics. We call it as a strategic measure. Okay, and then you have a target for that. So target tell you what you have to achieve for the coming periods. Maybe it could be for next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, whatever. Because if you want to achieve something, so it will not happen overnight. For example, if you want to improve your manufacturing efficiency from 75 to 95% or 75 to 85%, it will not happen overnight. So you have to do it in a step-by-step manner. Okay, so maybe for first year you improve 5%, maybe next year you improve 10%. So this is how you need to define your supply chain objectives and measures. Okay, and then you assess the gap. So how does that gap you close it? Now you have a target to improve 5% in manufacturing. That is fine. It's a good wish list. But how you close it? So you need to have a pro initiative for that. So it could be a Six Sigma project. It could be a ERP implementation project. It could be any training project, or it could be a new enhancement for your customer service, whatever. So you have to identify those gaps. Then how you close, you need to identify the initiatives or objectives or whatever. So now that will tell you how to close. Okay. Uh, then once we identify KPIs and objectives and then initiatives, so supply chain functions. Now this will work like that. So you have a departments in supply chain. You have a procurement, you have logistics, you have manufacturing, inventory, customer service, blah blah blah. Okay, now these people don't talk as a holistic supply chain language. Okay, so they talk only their departmental languages. Okay, so if you are talking to procurement, they limit themselves to talk to about procurement process. Okay, likewise. Now this just a small table to tell you as an example. Okay, so you need to set from the strategy point of view, you need to set what is expected from each department. For example, if you are selling make to stock products, the way procurement has to be done is different because you focus more on a cost efficiency. Okay, so if you are more on a variety basis, make to order kind of thing, so you don't purchase in a larger quantities, you purchase in a more or less in a make to as required. Okay, so it all depends. Okay, so it could be if you are agile supply chain. Okay, so yeah, delivering on time is a more priority, even if it has a little cost increase, it does not matter. But the delivering on time is something which is very critical on delivery. Nowadays, a quick commerce will talk about 10 minutes delivery, 30, 20 minutes delivery. So if you don't have your robust supply chain designed for that, you cannot do. Okay, this is exactly what you need to define for the roles. Okay. Now, when we talk about supply chain, okay, when we talk about supply chain, so there is a supply chain policies, okay, because everybody don't do make to stock, make to order, bulk purchase. They don't talk about every day. So, for example, if you're a reorder level, are you following a reorder level policies? Are you order quantity? How do you identify order quantities? Is it really economic order quantity following, or what are your safety stocks? So what is this policies? For example, if you want to have a safety stocks, so you need to have a service levels for each category of the items. Okay, so how do you define that? It's a policy. Okay, now these policies have to be aligned to the business strategy. Okay, so likewise, okay, so again, so agility and flexibility in supply chain operations, that you need to really list them down. Okay, so it will not happen just like that. So you need to make sure that you list them down. So what are the connectivities in the supply chain? Make sure that these are addressed at the strategy level. Okay, sometimes if you are delivering a C class items and customer can stay, is not really an urgent thing, so you don't have to rush the delivery. Okay. So there is nothing you need to. So you need to prioritize what is it required and then design your supply chain accordingly. Okay. So technology. Now we talk about all these processes and uh, we talk about all these processes, and then without technology nothing happens. Okay, so now technology is everywhere to automate all your processes. So you need to really make sure that the technology supports all your processes. Okay, so if you're warehouse operations professional, or if you are a manufacturing executive or something, so how does the technology enable you to achieve what strategy says? Okay, so that is where you need to invest in the technology. So for example, you have a small plant where you don't need much technology, then you don't need to invest much on it. Okay, so likewise, your investment in technologies and automating the processes have to be aligned to the technology. Okay, so culture, again, when you talk about aligning the strategy, so your organization culture, continuous improvement initiatives, okay, your operational reviews and cross-functional learning and development, everything have to be aligned to the strategy. Okay, if you miss this point, so you end up in a problem. Okay, so likewise, so still we are talking about step one, which is aligning to the strategy. Okay, so communicating the goals, like how does that alignment happen? In the first step is, so you have a strategic objectives, and these, and of course the KPIs and all, this has to be communicated to the individuals. So if you don't communicate, people don't know what is the strategy for them. Okay, so if somebody in the warehouse, if they say you need to achieve order fulfillment rate like 95% or 100%, then if you do this, your business is going to improve percentage X. Okay, so that's how people understand and the linkages to the strategy. Okay, so communication is one of the very important. Okay, so this is something aligning strategy to the supply chain. So just I repeat, so we talk about strategic objectives and measures. Then you identify the initiatives to close the gaps. And then you make sure that your inventory policy, the supply chain policies are aligned to the strategy, organization structure, any other projects, improvement projects, and then culture. Everything have to be aligned to the strategy. I think this is one of the very important part where you have to take care of things. Now let us go to the real supply chain part. Okay, now let us plot. The step number two is, when you have a larger supply chain, okay, talking generally is not going to help you. First thing you need to do is you need to plot it. Okay, so you need to plot supply chain. So design something like this. So you put all your physical supply chain components, like we call it as a nodes, supply chain nodes. Just put them, okay, in a nice diagram. That is a step number one. So then you identify the bottlenecks, okay, or you identify the how. Yeah, before identifying the bottlenecks, First thing, once we put up the supply chain, then you identify the stocking positions. So where you store the products. So you plot that. What are the lead times for individual link? Okay. Then once we complete all this, how many? For example, you talk about suppliers. How many suppliers? You talk about local suppliers. How many? So you talk about warehouses. How many? So completely put the number for that. How many? What is the inventory stocking points? Okay. So what is the safety stocks you want to observe? I'll come to the safety stocks. So, so this is the first thing is you need to complete uh, plot the material flow. Okay. So once we plot the material flows, you can see you can identify highlights where you can note the details, the stocking points kind of thing. How do you do that? Let us see it. Okay, so while collecting the information, these templates can be used. So, so in the supply chain, you take each node, you collect the information like this is a template, you can take it. Okay, we will share this file, so you can use it for your company to do it. Okay, so use the template to map the components. So then, okay, so it works like this. So first step is you complete your supply chain, then you finish your lead times number, then your stocking points, identify stocking points, and then you come up with the lead times. Okay, so then once we complete all this, okay, so likewise, so the moment you put it, you understand the complexity of your supply chain. Okay. So this is, then each link in this supply chain have to be assessed. Okay, is this link working perfectly or not? So that is in the step 4 and step 5. But plotting this, making supply chain is very clear to everybody is first step, is one of the most important step in the supply chain assessment. Okay. So now the second point in the plotting is while doing the while plotting itself, you can get a common sense. Okay, so there could be a possible bottlenecks or gaps, the capacity gaps. You can identify them. Maybe you will not be having 100% accurate understanding of the supply chain process at that point of time, but largely you know, okay, this could be a pain area. So you take them notes. You take them notes like this. Okay, so until you finish all the supply chain assessments, you cannot conclude, but you make a note while doing assessment, the plotting the supply chain. You make a note of all this. Okay, identify the bottlenecks kind of thing. Okay, then what happens is it's better to put it in a visual flow, because supply chain is all visual impact. If you don't put it in a visual, it's very difficult to understand all the supply chain parties. It is very difficult. If it is not impossible, it's very difficult. So put all your supply chain into a diagram. So what are the type of visual flow diagrams? So you have a list here, like you can have a network diagram, manufacturing plants, last mile deliveries. Okay, so lead time overlays. So these are the possible diagrams, you can use it. Okay, likewise. Okay, and also while collecting, while plotting your material flow diagram as a step 2, so you also collect all the documents used. It could be your production order template, purchase order template. Okay, so all those things, make sure that you collect them. Okay, so when you talk to them, you collect what are the delays you are expecting, what are the last mile delivery constraints, all the things, you just collect them. So you keep hearing, you hear them. You don't need to judge whether this is what is the reason for that. You don't know at that point of time, but you collect them, put them in a repository, and then put everything a template like that. So here you see here constraint. So this is your understanding of the overall. Let me try to take this. So this is the constraint categories. So supplier delays, production bottleneck delays, kind of thing. So you have something like that. You have a specific issue, late shipments of critical raw materials. This is one issue you identify when you are talking to the supply chain executives. Okay, so you get them. Okay, so you get them who is that doing it. So impact of it, the root cause, currently what you are trying to do to mitigate this kind of problem, and then who is responsible for this. So you just collect all the information. What is happening currently? Okay. For example, there is a stock out scenario. So what you do currently, what you are doing, don't worry about the best practice. Currently, what you are doing, because the moment we ask you what you do, people don't tell you facts. Okay, so they try to tell good things when you do assessment. People try to good things, and especially if there is a problem from themselves, they will definitely try to avoid that. Okay, but that is not the objective of supply chain assessment. The objective of supply chain assessment is to improve supply chain, so not to create any problem. Okay, so this is how you plot them, and then you finish the plotting of the supply chain. Okay, so you take all the supply chain notes, put them properly, identify the number of stocking points, number of customers, number of suppliers, number of warehousing, number of items, blah, blah, blah. You finish them, collect the templates in which link, what are the documents it is used, and then talk to the, while talking to collect the pain areas and what is the current solution, what they are trying to do. Okay. Then the third process is deep, there is a disturbance. Okay, so just check with that. Okay. Okay. So mapping organizational planning process, that is in step number 3. So once we complete this part, okay, the next is once we finish the physical supply chain documentation, so the planning process have to be discussed. Now this is very important. So material flows and planning flows, these have to be worked together. Then only it will be mapped in sync. Otherwise, you don't know what is the reason for the poor performance, whether it is a material part of it or it could be like a planning part of it. We don't know. So now the step 3 is mapping of the supply chain or organizational planning process. So here, so in this supply chain organizational planning processes. 1 second, give me 1 second, please. Yeah. Sorry, sorry. Okay, so there was a disturbance. I have to just step out and tell. Okay, so mapping of organizational planning process, which is one of the most important part. Now, have a strategy. We talk about strategic alignment. So then we talk about the planning part, the next level. Okay. So first, what we have to do is you identify all planning processes in the organization, which includes your sales and operations planning, your master production scheduling process, your MRP, inventory planning, replenishment process or transportation, all the planning processes. And then you try to plot them. Okay. And then see, is there any gap? Is some planning process is missing? And then some planning process is bypassed. Okay. So that is creating a problem. Okay. This is, we have witnessed with through our, by doing many assessments. So we have witnessed that there are many companies who don't follow proper planning engine. So they end up in a trouble in the operations. Okay, so they think that the material problem of material flow in the supply chain is the problem, whereas they have a gap in the planning processes. Okay, so once you do the planning, organizational planning processes step by step like this, so what we'll do is it, just let us here see it. So these are all typical planning processes in the organization. So if you may be doing in a very simple informal way, but you have to do this somehow, one way or other. Okay, so you identify them. Okay, so these processes you take one by one and then identify. For example, now it all starts with the business planning and budgeting. Okay, so what is required for the whole year? So how you want to do that? Look, capital expenditure. Now I'll tell you here. So how does that business planning and budgeting is connected to supply chain? Your question. Now, one of the key things in the planning, business planning and budgeting is the capex. Okay, so capex initiatives, capital expenditure. So capex initiatives, what basically? It's a capacities. So it could be your manufacturing plant expansion. It could be a new plant. It could be a new machine. It could be a new warehouse, new trucks. Okay, new information system. All your one way or other, it is related to your supply chain. So when you are doing a business planning and budgeting, make sure that your calculations or analysis is really aligned to your strategy, and then it is really taken the operational issues also into consideration. Okay, so you have a capital expenditures, operational expenditures, and strategic expenditures. Because all these have to be linked to the strategy and also to your supply chain. And S&OP is, of course, we all know that sales and operation is the linking pin. It's a linking pin for the business plan and business plan and budget to the execution. So, in case if you are not following a S&OP process, no matter no actually it does not matter your size of business, you need to have a sales and operations planning one way or other. Okay, so maybe you can have a simplified sales and operations planning process, but you must have this. Okay, so the moment you have a sales and operation planning process, so it connects to the it connects the planning process at the volume level. So product group level planning, it connects, and also you can do some high level capacity planning. Like we call it as a rough cut capacity planning at the S&OP level. Then we have a production. If you have a manufacturing plant, so production scheduling is one of the key area. You will do it. Okay, so this you map them all. Okay, so you map them all. Okay, so likewise, have a detailed production scheduling. This is like operational planning, MRP. Okay, of course, you have to do MRP. Your capacity planning. Okay, your transportation planning, your inventory planning. All these comes into category of detailed scheduling and planning. Okay, now once you have these plans, okay, what happens is you see the right side is an example of one of our clients what we have done. So this planning process is perfectly aligned. Then you find it a very simple, very smooth supply chain operations. So what happens when you don't? I'll show you one example. Okay, so step 3 is in this the planning process. You need to do analysis. Okay, now you plotted the planning processes, and then you need to do some kind of inputs. You analyze it. Okay, here in this, so you have a planning process, business planning, budgeting, S&OP, MPS, MRP, blah blah blah. Then how it is done currently? So what is the data flows? Is it automated or is it manual process? Who is preparing? How it is flowing? So what are the there or not, and what is the problems? So in this planning process, what is the problem? You might not be surprised that there could be one complete process is missing itself. You might witness that. So you have to identify that, and then improvement opportunities. Again, here you don't have to really identify exact gaps. At this point, still you did not do the whole supply chain assessment. Okay, so you identify what could be the problem. So identify the opportunities, guys. This is the opportunities what I would like to improve. Okay. Now here we come. Identify the disconnects. So you identify the disconnects and the overlaps. Okay. So identify the disconnects and the overlaps. You spend some time, and then how does that disconnects are going to happen? Okay. And so you try to come up with the you start identifying the disconnects and also overlaps. Sometimes there could be a planning overlaps. So already a planning department in the company is doing one set of planning, and the same thing is done in the production. So they are also doing a delivery scheduling or kind of thing. So there could be a possibility that somebody do plan twice, and these two plans don't synchronize. Then you have a problem. Okay. So if you see here, common disconnects and overlaps, like siloed systems, redundant tasks, blah, blah. So you something like that. Okay. So what next is identify disconnects. I just continuing. Okay. Okay. So document again, as you did it for materials. Okay. Now you document them. So you take up the categories, you describe the gaps, what is the impact, what is the root cause. So in these common problems, so what you are trying to do now, okay. So likewise, you have a template. So you just fix it. Okay. So you identify the tentative plan for that. Okay. Now again, still it is not final. Okay. So now that will be in the next step. Okay. Now you have a force. You have completed the material part. You plotted it. You identify the key area. The second thing, you have reviewed all your planning processes. Now you put them together, okay, and then you review them. Now there are two steps. One is identify the disconnects in the planning process, and then identify the gaps in the material flow. These two usually we need to do it together. Okay, so if you are talking about the planning processes, okay, so here you identify them. So what you need to do is uh, uh, review integration of planning process. That means, uh, so what happens is here, this is sometimes, you do planning in an Excel file without considering some kind of constraints. So this is quite possible. Okay. Or maybe the inventory required for your S&OP, okay, not 100% correct, not updated. So your plan leads to some kind of wrong calculations. Okay. Now I identify those disconnects here. So all the disconnects, you can identify them. Okay. So for the planning processes. Okay. So typically, these are how you identify them. So first is identify the missing planning process. First step, what you have to do is there anything missing, first of all? Because if there is any planning process is missing, then you have a big problem. So there is no point of optimizing. You need to re-engineer the process. Second thing is all the intersections. So how to test the planning process effectiveness is, remember me, note, you will not find this in the textbooks or somewhere. You will not find in any supply chain textbooks or something. How to effectively check your supply chain planning process is, if one plan one there are interlinkages. So S&OP, your master production scheduling and detail. If these things work in sync, that means your planning process is working. Almost always it will not work like that, because S&OP owner, he does S&OP process, and then he leave it to master production scheduler to do it. He very rarely, if not regularly, very rarely, he reconcile. Okay, now are you using the same numbers what you use? Okay, so he's really you do the planning as in alignment with S&OP. So very rarely it is done. So if all these planning process intersections, you need to test it properly, whether it is really used or not. Third thing is gap at the each intersection. So you identify the gap. It's very easy to do it. Very systematic way to assess your supply chain. Identify the gap, and then you come up with the inaccuracies, the process accuracies, and then document all the disconnects. That's how you need to try. One example. So one of our client. So when you do a supply chain assessment, so this will tell you here. So this was a as is flow. So with when we start, we everything is like a very fine. It's very nicely done. But this company, one of our my client, so we had a problem in capacity utilization. Okay, so not capacity utilization, order fulfillment. So but they cannot meet. So what is identified is they are missing a planning box here. So they are not using any formal S&OP. They are not using a formal MRP process. So this is a gap. So now everything is done in a bits and pieces. Okay, and you are expecting that your order fulfillment process leads to achieve the service levels to the customers. So this was a gap. You have a capacity, but you cannot meet. So we introduced this planning box. Okay, then everything is become very simple, very straightforward, very simple, and then you know how to do it. So this is one example. Okay, how to solve your planning processes problem. Okay, now step number 5 is you identify the planning gaps, and then you come up with what to do. Then you see the material gaps. Now you have a full picture of your business planning part, sales and operations planning part, material flow structure. So since you have the complete visibility, now you identify the material gap. So people usually, supply chain managers, what they do, and even the business managers is they think this is a right solution for a particular gap. Okay. So actually, maybe this is designed in such a way this process is really addressing a supply strategy. Okay. So, but when managers do assessment, they change it process without complete doing the assessment of the whole supply chain. So this is a very really a serious problem in the supply chain domain. Very rarely people do assessment of the whole supply chain. Uh, Identifying the material gaps will be very easy once we have a complete picture. So how do you do that? Okay. So analyze material flows. Okay. Then it is like that. So each step. So you observe each intersection again in the material flow. Again, as I said, so supply chain, we always follow in the supply chain nodes how your manufacturing is working, how your warehouse is working, how your customer service is working, how your procurement is working. Very rarely we talk about the links. So, okay. So first thing is you see the intersection of the material flows, you identify the gaps. This is where you either you identify the right gap or you identify the problem, okay, directly. Second thing is, so analyze the material flow dynamics. It could be, so these linkages are smooth. Okay, the pipe is smooth. You don't have problem. Nothing is obstructing the flow. Then you see the capacities. So it could be a warehouse capacity, manufacturing capacities, transportation inefficiency. You take node by node. So it is very, now since you clear all the links, so you talk about the nodes, you identify them properly, how to clean it up. Okay, then review the policies. Maybe there is a wrong policy. Some super smart supply chain executive came, he established, and he left. Now you are following the same. So how many times you change your inventory policies or your supply chain policies? Very rarely. Somebody like, I'll tell you an example, 30 days safety stock. Very stupid thing you can do it. 30 days safety stock for all the products, whether it is A class item, B class item, C class item, or it could be as spare parts. You say 30 days safety stock. Some super smart supply chain executive came and fixed this process. We follow, because inventory is your liability. Basically, it's a cost. Okay, so it stays in the balance sheet liabilities. So this is a big problem. So if you have a too much inventory, it's a waste of time. You have inventory carrying costs, pilferage, slippages, everything. It occupies space. It's a cost. So now come up with the check the inventory policies. Finally, you identify the bottleneck analysis. You do that. Okay. Now you are in a position to identify real problems. So do that. Okay. Finally, you document them, all your observations, come up with the recommendations. Okay. So usually this is where uh, your gap closures will be more or less like common sense. So the moment you do the assessment, the gap closure will look like a more or less like a common sense. So it is like that. If you see a picture, this is one of our other clients. Okay, so this is a link S3. For S3, you can document. So what happened? Okay, then you identify the gaps likewise. Okay, so if you see example, this is a whole supply chain. The intersections can be seen like S1 to blah blah, S1, S2, S3, S4, and each intersection, what are the key gaps? You identify them. So if you have a holistic view of your supply chain, you can really understand what is the gaps. Okay, so you can you use these templates to you can add one more two columns based on your experience or based on your need. But in general, these kind of templates will be useful for you. Okay, so now let us go. You identified them. Okay. Now what? Now it's if you have a manufacturing plant, you cannot do this assessment like this for a manufacturing plant. It is completely different. So you identify the manufacturing plant. Okay. Identify gaps in manufacturing process. How will you do that? Evaluate the manufacturing capabilities. process bottlenecks, because it's very easy to identify. Assess the capacity and batch sizes. So are you really producing to the capacities and batch sizes putting properly? And then you document the gaps. I'll just give you an example. So here in this, first of all, when you do the assessment for manufacturing process, okay, so talk about manufacturing capabilities, which is your bill of materials, your routing, your production scheduling processes, your lead times. This is where people don't update them regularly, and it is very important. Okay, so this is these documents are there. It is not that you don't have them. Bill of materials, without bill of materials, nothing happens. They are 100% accurate almost always, but routing, no. So routing is a tricky one. People don't do routing very well. So routing is what? The sequence of steps what you do to produce particular manufacturing product. Okay, now when you talk about a sequence of steps, each step has its setup time, run time, queue time, wait time, or whatever. So how do we do that? So if we don't have this part in routing, that means you are not fully, you don't know fully about your manufacturing process. Okay, so your lead times and all, you don't know really. You are doing like a ballpark number, your high level guess. You do that. Okay, then you have a production scheduling. Uh, Again, production scheduling is like there is no scientific approach people follow based on experience, based on gut feeling or whatever. They do production scheduling. There are different concepts for production scheduling, so they don't follow. So if you follow them, you get performance optimization in manufacturing. But it is the one of the big challenge in manufacturing is, even if you don't follow, you don't know whether we are not following or we are following. That's the problem. It is very hard to convince manufacturing heads because they are very focused on their product quality and all. So operational optimizations, they always try to catch up. Okay. So identify the bottlenecks again here. Okay. So one of the most important is you can do a value stream mapping. In case if you are able to do the value stream mapping, please do that. So when you do the value stream mapping, you remove non-value added steps in your manufacturing process. You identify the value added, what is the required processes, and then that will also help you. In case if you can do the value stream mapping, it is a fantastic way to do it. Like capacities again. So once you do this, the capacities do you have enough capacity? So if you don't have capacities properly, it's almost always a problem. Okay. Then you have a material balancing in and out. Your work in process measurement, inventory is properly or not, kind of thing. Okay. Then operational timestamps and lead times. You just complete supply. Your shop floor is recorded for the timestamps. It is very important. It looks very stupid, but your ERP does not do that. So if you are still only depending on the ERP, what happens is you finally, whatever you complete your production quantities and then the operational rates, whatever, you record into the ERP. But ERP don't help you to proactively manage your manufacturing process. That is the reason the manufacturing execution system is in place. So you have to use manufacturing execution system to proactively manage your manufacturing processes. Connect your machines, get the insights from your machines, because it is not an option now. You have to do that. And also you manage work center by work center, material balancing, operational timestamps, and also machine insights. So do that steps like a quality, embed the quality, the data flows and integrations, multiple systems. So compliance, of course, this is compliance. People do that because it is required anyways. And also safety. So if you ignore safety and compliance, and it's all, you definitely end up in a problem. So you need to do that. Okay. So this is one example. I'll give one example, real-time example. How does that? What is the simple things you can do to optimize kind of thing? Okay. So now these are the two different customers. Okay, how these shop floors are aligned. Okay, so if you take this right side, so there is a very simple tier one automotive manufacturers like process shop, blah blah blah. So there are different work centers, one, two work center, 9 work centers we call it. So how do we do that? So when we did the assessment, So we always thinking that the brazing is the bottleneck. Okay, so brazing is the bottleneck, and also radiator core assembly is the bottleneck. These are the two things we thought. This is the bottleneck. Okay, inventory positions. Then you just look at this. This is the load capacity profiles. How many times you do the load capacity profiles for your shop floor? I don't think you will be doing this because you will not have time to report and manage. So this is the load profile diagram. So if you have see a day wise, okay, so you see here, okay, it could be a day wise, it could be a month wise or whatever. So usually you can do the day wise. So you see here what is a load and a capacity. So we were thinking this is your bottleneck. Okay, so this is was your uh, bottleneck. Actually, in reality, after brazing, so there is a stop for the curing of the product and testing and all. This is where you have a problem. Okay, so you don't really know what is your bottleneck until you do the load capacity profile. So this is one example. How can you optimize your supply chain manufacturing setup? That's the reason you need to do a separate step for the manufacturing process optimization, manufacturing assessment. Okay, you cannot mix it that with your supply chain. It has to be a separate step. So you do that. So this is a template where you can do the gap analysis. So where is your current state, gap identified, impact. So you identify the recommendations. Okay, then come up with the so you continue. Okay, so likewise you are talking about manufacturing capability, bill of materials, routing, production scheduling. Okay, so lead times, capacity planning, blah blah blah. You have all of them. Step 7. So I know I have another 10 minutes. So step 7 is so financial flows and cost assessment. So basically, as far as supply chain assessment is concerned, so you don't worry about your accounts, general ledgers, what is your overheads, allocation. No, here basically you talk about real direct costs. Okay, how do you incur in the supply chain direct costs? Okay, so you take them, especially like working capital, cash to cash cycle kind of thing. Okay, so if you do that, so document financial flows like supplier payments, inventory holding costs, and also your revenue cycles. So this is how, okay, well, financially inefficiencies. If there is anything like a high inventory holding cost kind of thing, so you identify them. Okay, so likewise, cash flow analysis, you do it, document your observations. Finally, you can do improvement. Okay, so you have to do that. So it's very important that financial flows and cost assessment also need to be done. Cost assessment, yeah. So these overhead allocations and all, we do by unit. Usually, number of production units, you allocate the overhead cost to that, whatever. So that is not the best way to do it. So there is an activity-based costing. You can do that very in a very easy step. So we have one speaker, Gary Hawkins. Today we are talking about this. You attended. So it is very important that activity-based costing is used for your cost assessment. Okay, so this is a template where you can put all your financial flows into a template. So you can use these templates, by the way. Organization structure gaps. So once we do that, if there is any organization restructuring is required, so please do that. Okay. So now by doing a little organization restructuring, you can really assign the responsibility and the roles for individuals to take care of some missing planning process. For example, if your planning process is missing, you need to introduce a new planning function, and then somebody has to take care of that. So that structure has to be part of your structure. Okay. So likewise, I don't dwell. Okay. Now this is one important part is step number 9. When you do the supply chain assessment, we do all about physical infrastructure, everything. But one of the most important is you make sure that your complete supply chain members, whoever is involved, are skilled, and then they have enough training for that. So there is a step how to do it. So you evaluate core skills required. Once after the organization structure, you identify that, come up with the skills, identify the gaps. Okay, so then you have a template. then you can do some sort of training plan. Okay. So step number 10, this is where you come up with your plan for the optimization. So it looks like that. For each gap, okay, and then you identify the whole. In fact, you come up with a plan to close all the gaps. Based on again, you don't have to close every gap. It's not possible. So you put in a phase-wise optimization. Okay, so you come up with a plan. So it looks like that. Okay, so supply chain solution development implement likewise. So you have a supply chain strategy. You can do that. So you can, if you have a planning processes, material flows, blah blah blah. So once we do that, so you come up with the initiatives, the projects to close the gaps. Like it could be a supply chain strategy for, it could be a technology implementation, it could be organization restructuring kind of thing. And then these initiatives you need to put them as a priority. So you come up with the priority scale, and then you have a plan for that. Okay, so you have a plan. You have a plan. So this will look like that. So you have all sequence of initiatives. You identify them, what to do first, what to do second, what to do third, and then you achieve them all in one shot. How to take care of your supply chain health. So this is like a summary what we do. Uh, uh, just to give you a final. So align with your business strategy, focus end-to-end integration, data-driven decisions, immediate wins and long-term value. Both you need to try to balance the immediate wins and then long-term value. Invest on the people, on technology. This is where you have a big problem. You don't invest on people, on technology, you will be lagging behind. So financial impacts, change management. So when you're doing a change, a strategic transformation or supply chain transformation, managing change is very critical. And then also it's not one-time job. You have to have a continuous improvement plan for that. Okay, so for next steps. So in case if you are doing a supply chain assessment for your organization, you can do it. We can help you to do that. Remotely, directly, indirectly, whatever way. Okay, select the right partner to do it, because by sitting in supply chain, I may not be knowing all my pain areas. Somebody looking from outside, they will be knowing, or they have a unbiased way of thinking of your supply chain optimization. So give them a chance to help you. Okay, identify the custodian for the transformation. So if you don't have a custodian for the whole transformation, it will be a problem. So leadership role is very critical. The leadership have to drive. Okay, so leadership have to drive. Most important is the execution. So any plan, all usually what happens is you do the supply chain and manufacturing assessments. When it comes to the implementation, management slow down. Okay, well, now we know what to do, but they don't execute it. Remember, until or unless you execute your plans, nothing is going to. You're not going to achieve anything. Okay, so if you want to do your achieve excellence in supply chain, supply chain initiatives needs to be executed properly. Okay, I think this is the lecture. Okay, if you have any questions, please just screen share. Let me know your questions. Okay, and I will be happy to share. I think this presentation is already in my LinkedIn post. You can look at it, and then you talk about it. Yeah,